So I have seen 28 years later The Bone Temple, and I am here to give my review. So I'm going to start off with a pretty vague, non-spoiler review right now, and then later on in the video we'll get into some more spoilers. So I don't know how long this video is going to be, but we're going to get right into it. So 28 years later, this is sort of a deluxe version of 28 years later, the first one, right? It kind of picks up right where it leaves off with the Jimmy crew, the Jimmy cult, picking up Spike, and Spike is integrated into this group. And if you're thinking that this is going to continue a lot of the story beats from the previous movie, I'm going to have to tell you right now that the only thing that's really continuing is the story of Dr. Kelson and Jimmy himself, the Sir Lord Jimmy guy. Played brilliantly by Jack O'Connell. And Ray Fiennes also does a really good job as Dr. Kelson in this movie. It is more centered around those two characters. And so Dr. Kelson is trying to... he's just kind of minding his own business in the Bone Temple, right? And he, in a way, tries to domesticate and befriend Samson, the large alpha infected. But the question is, does it work? Does he actually manage to tame this beast, or is he going to suffer a fate worse than death? As for Sir Jimmy Crystal is his name, we see Spike is more of a passive observer. He obviously wants to leave the group, but most of the story is centered around him being sort of a viewing audience, kind of like our eyes as an audience to what is really going on in the story, while we focus more on Sir Jimmy Crystal as a character. And so the movie, before you go into it, it is gruesome, it is brutal, it is probably, of this franchise, the most brutal to date. There were some scenes, torture scenes particularly, where it gets kind of rough to watch. So it's hard to say, like, if you can handle Saw, you'll be fine. But, like, if you're not accustomed to, like, torture prawn, then this movie's going to be a rough watch. The first two acts, first hour and a half, kind of are all set up to try and get you integrated into the characters. There's less world building in this one than there were in the previous film, and by the time it gets to the third act, it just goes full on bonkers. But the great thing about it is that it actually focuses on the characters. I will say that this is better than 28 Years Later. Now, that's kind of a praise coming from me. I was surprised at how good this movie actually was. That doesn't mean that it's the greatest movie ever. It's a pretty decent 5 or 6 out of 10, right? It's not movie of the year worthy. It's not like super great. It's just a slightly bit more competent than the last movie. The last movie was more artsy fartsy. Was like they crammed 2 movies into one. It didn't fit right, and so I said that, you know, if this movie, The Bone Temple, was not a banger, it makes the first movie look bad. I was wrong, because somehow this movie ended up being pretty good, and it still makes the first movie look bad. But I digress. I still think that 28 Days Later, the franchise, you know, opener, the debut film, is the best of the franchise by far. And while 28 Weeks Later is flawed, that opening 10 minutes of 28 Weeks Later washes everything in the entire franchise. But The Bone Temple is somewhere in between 28 Weeks Later and 28 Days Later to me. It's somehow better than both 28 Years Later and 28 Weeks Later, but still not as good as 28 Days Later. I know that's all confusing. I get it. Trust me. But I will say that after seeing it, it was a fun experience in the theater. I will watch this movie a couple more times for sure. I liked it, but I really think it has to stick the landing. They're planning a trilogy. They just confirmed that the third one is being in production right now. But as far as I'm concerned, if this third movie does not stick the landing, it doesn't really matter how good The Bone Temple is, because this whole franchise will start to deteriorate a lot like The Walking Dead did. And that is not something I want for this franchise. All good stories have endings. So right now, I'm just like, let's get to the point. Let's conclude and wrap everything up, and then let's go off and, you know, have a great franchise here. But as of right now, it just doesn't seem like we're going to head that direction just yet, but let's get into spoilers. So if you want to see 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple, and you haven't seen it, I recommend it. This is your chance to click off now, because I'm going to go into spoiler territory from here on, all right? So there's your spoiler warning. 3, 2, 1. All right. So the movie opens up with a the audio sounds of zombies and the apocalypse before you hear Jim say hello, just to hint at Jim's return at the end of the movie. Then we go right into introducing the Jimmy cult, who they are. They're based off of like Jimmy Savile or something. I'm not from the UK, so I don't know the deep lore behind that. But what I do know is that Sir Jimmy Crystal is a Satanist. He believes that old Nick, who is Satan, is whispering to him. He's under this delusion that he's being whispered to by Satan, old Nick. And so he's part of this cult that has to have 7 fingers, which are each of the different Goonies for Sir Jimmy Crystal. Spike is forced to fight to the death with one of the fingers and then stabs him in the leg. His artery starts bleeding out like crazy. And then by default, the dude dies and Spike joins the Jimmies. Meanwhile, Dr. Kelson is trying to domesticate and tame Samson. Samson shows up with his big wanging dong flinging around, and Dr. Kelson starts hitting him with morphine, doing these the little blow darts with morphine. And now Samson's domesticated. He's all going, oh, and he's like, he's a little bit more numbed out because of the morphine. But because of that, the treatments, or not the treatment, the infection starts to wane on him a little bit. It starts to show that there's still a little bit of human in his mind. And so Dr. Kelson's whole arc here is trying to figure out if you can treat the infection and get rid of the worst aspects of it. And so he deems it as psychosis. So this is a new lore to the 28 Days Later franchise, where the infected are just under a constant psychosis. They're just going crazy. And that makes sense. But can you treat that? And so I do have to ask these kind of questions analytically. The Jimmy cult run into a group of survivors on the mainland. Now, here's where the problems come in for me. How did the Jimmy cult last this long? Jimmy's been around since he was a little kid on the mainland. How did he survive this long? How did he learn? How did they all learn Power Ranger Kung Fu and Ninjutsu? I have no idea how they managed to learn all this shit. I can assume that they survived by going house to house in different parts of the mainland and doing what they do in this movie, which is terrorize, raid, and pillage and kill to do these ceremonies, which they end up skinning people and pulling their shirts off, which is just, this part of their body, skinning them from the waist up. These people are evil, pure evil, which is, good for film. I want evil villains. I want to hate these people. I want to root against them. I don't want a sympathetic villain, not some pussy that I can't, hate. And it's like, oh, they're just doing this because they're traumatized or some shit. Like, nah, man. I want an evil villain that I can actually root against. That way it makes our protagonists look better. And so there are several moments where there is good writing, where it's like, okay, these characters are making logical decisions. They're doing things that a normal human would do in this scenario. However, the analytical things come from more like, after this pregnant lady, which of course, this is where it's like, okay, we wouldn't send a pregnant lady out into the mainland, out into the wilderness to hunt for things because there's a bunch of rage zombies out there. They're going to get her, right? No logical person will do that, but we had to establish that a pregnant lady could do it, I guess. This is a Nia DaCosta film, after all. Still better, one of her best films, aside from, all the other shit films she's been involved with. But this pregnant lady gets away from the Jimmy cult and never talked about again. But most of her family and the camp that she was in on the mainland are dead from the Jimmies. One of the Jimmies, which I think her name is just Jimmy, because all the fingers of Jimmy's cult are called Jimmy. She is played by, I want to say, Erin Kellyman, redhead Freckle Jesus from Solo and Falcon and Winter Soldier. She was Carly Morgenthau, right? She's better in this movie than I've seen her in most things, but she's still not great. She's one of the worst aspects of this film. She can't act for shit. She's always playing the same character. So, I mean, she's better in this film, but that's not much. That's a low bar. You know what I mean? So I do think, though, that she's far more likable in this than she is in most other things that I've seen her in. She has binoculars and she catches Dr. Kelson dancing like a lunatic with Samson at the Bone Temple. Now I have to ask the question: how is it that the Jimmies have roamed the mainland this long and they've never come across Dr. Kelson in this big ass Bone Temple? How did they never come across that? No idea. They just never did. Because then she comes back to Jimmy Crystal, that is, and she's like, "Hey, I found old Nick. I found Satan. He's over here. He's dancing with the Alpha. He tamed the Alpha." And of course, Jimmy's like, "Oh shit." I was just making this shit up the whole time. What do you mean you saw Satan? And it's because of the orange skin. Dr. Kelson has all this iodine on his skin, so it makes him look like he's the devil, essentially. And so Jimmy goes and confronts him and is like, "Hey, man, I'm full of shit. I'm traumatized because my dad was a pastor who got attacked by the rage zombies, and then I was meant to believe that was Satan releasing his demons upon the world." And Dr. Kelson's like, no, it's just an infection. It was just an infection that ravaged the world. Now, this is the part where I was kind of like, is this a shot at people that are like doomsday Christians? The people that believe that infections are like demons and whatnot. Like, I felt like they were taking a shot at this. You have to remember that Alex Garland, as a writer, is super, super allegorical. So he likes to make these like small little like, oh, it's a metaphor for this, this, and this, but it doesn't include the actual context. He's all about subtext in his writing, but he doesn't include the actual context of what is being told on screen. That is why I hate allegory, and I'm not particularly a huge fan of doing it myself in writing or watching it otherwise. Because every time you try to make an allegorical story, you make a shit contextual story. It doesn't make a lot of sense. Unless you're really high or pretentious. So we find out, okay, what's going to happen? Jimmy kind of blackmails Dr. Kelson. He's like, "Hey, you're going to help me. You're going to pretend to be Satan, and you're going to help me convince my cult that you're Satan and that we're going to be your children. Or you're not Satan. I'm going to tell them you're not Satan, and then we're all going to kill you." And Dr. Kelson's like, "All right, well, I don't really have a choice because you're going to kill me if I don't do this." So Jimmy and his cult go to the Bone Temple. Dr. Kelson sets up this whole elaborate thing where he puts a bunch of lanterns up and lamps all over the bones and all over the obelisks of the Bone Temple. And I'm like, how did he manage to do this in a day? Because he managed to build an elaborate set out of the Bone Temple. Now, I get it. He's been out there for a long time. This movie definitely answered the question about, what did Dr. Kelson, like, how has he managed to survive this long out there and not get attacked? Especially when he's stacking up bones like that. Like, how the fuck do you survive out there out in the open? Well, he's got a bunker where he keeps all of his shit. So he's relatively well protected, all things considered. But he also has contingency plans when he comes across the Alpha. And we'll get to Samson here in a bit because his wobbly little dang is just wobbling around this entire fucking movie. But he does put on like a robe or something to cover himself up later on in the movie. We'll get to that. So Dr. Kelson starts, testing with Samson to try and counteract the effects of the infection and treat the psychosis. It's a big risk. No way he could know how to do it. He just kind of does it, right? He reads a lot of books. He goes through a lot of medicine. He's been practicing. He's been going through trial and error. I can appreciate that. And so he comes across something that gets Samson to speak. Samson says the word moon. We see the moon. And so basically, he's like, okay, I can treat the infection. We're going to take a big risk. So supposedly, Samson is coming, like he's seeing visions of his past. He's starting to regain the memories of who he was prior to being infected. as this is happening, Dr. Kelson builds this elaborate set. Like I said, I have no idea how he managed to build an elaborate set like that in a small amount of time, because the Jimmy Colt showed up one day and they're like, tomorrow we're going to come by. And it's like, you had a day. He had 24 hours to build that set, which is crazy. Now, I'm sure he could do it. I just have a hard time believing that he could. Especially building a giant upside down cross to which he could use as a crucifixion. Because then we have this fucking bonkers scene where the Jimmy Colt shows up to the Bone Temple. And Dr. Kelson plays, oh God, what's the name of the song? It's an Iron Maiden song. It's a Number of the Beast. He plays Number of the Beast by Iron Maiden and does this like crazy dance thing. He starts to rave with the Jimmies. He shoots, he basically gets them high. He blows like a bunch of drugs into their faces and they get they get all high so he can subdue them. And it's this crazy bonkers, like, he's all whoa, 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 a scene to the Number of the Beast by Iron Maiden. That is the takeaway from the movie. That is, if there's anything to see this movie for, that's the moment to go see it for. It's a fucking great scene. There's another scene that I love, and I will get to it here in a minute. But Dr. Kelson manages to convince the Jimmies that he is Satan. And while doing so, he commands the Jimmies to follow his every order, every word, because they are convinced. They are psychopaths, and they are convinced that this dude is Satan, okay? So, let's get to Samson. As Samson is regaining the memories of his past, we see a young Samson on a subway train, or not a subway train, but a train, which is the same train from the first movie where we saw his rage-infected girlfriend that was pregnant give birth, which, okay, that was a weak part of the movie, but whatever. And so, on that same train, Samson gets on it, and we see a lot of infected start to follow him, like, hey, bro, the boss is acting up, the alpha's acting up, right? And so we finally see a flashback of him as a child when the infection started to happen and when he got infected. And he sees a woman come up and say, tickets, please. But her face gets all mishmashed, and it starts to show you what the infected actually see, because the infected they feel like they're being attacked by something horrific, something demonic. And that's a scary jump scare where they did that. It was effective. Now, I wish they had taken a second to pause and lit the silence. One of the great things about 28 Days Later is the use of silence, right? The use of, like, you don't hear the zombies, but you can see them, from their perspective. And then, boom, that silence is completely shattered when the infected show up, right? They missed a lot of opportunities with these two movies to do that. But I digress. When Samson is on the train, all the infected from his clan are there, and they're just watching him, and he's like, I don't have a ticket. And it's like, oh shit. It was an oh shit moment. Samson can speak, he's coherent, and he's no longer showing signs of infection. All the infected start attacking him on the train. And we have this fucking great scene where Samson is ripping them apart, breaking their spines. They try to spit blood in his face to infect him again. They're trying to bite his shoulder out. They're all over him, and he's just, whoa, whoa, whoa. And I'm like, fuck. You could just play this the entire time, and I'd fucking love this movie. That moment in of itself made me be like, all right, I could just sit here and watch this the entire time. Of Samson the Alpha beating the fuck out of infected rage zombies. I will eat that shit up every day. It was awesome. They cut it short, which pissed me off because I was having a really good time watching that scene. But it was great. So, back to Dr. Kelson. After this giant elaborate dance rave thing that goes on, basically, the Jimmies are like, okay, we believe you're Satan now. All right, we believe you're Old Nick. What do you command of us? And while Dr. Kelson is unsure, he's playing a role. He's playing a role to survive. But he comes across a bit of a conundrum after he sees that Spike is among the people in the group. He knows that he's dealing with pure evil. And he knows that if he sends these people back out into the wilderness, they will continue to commit evil. And they're doing it at basically his request. And so he's having a struggle of conscience to do this. However, the entire movie we see that Freckle Jesus has a problem with Jimmy and thinks that he's full of shit. So she keeps trying to undermine him and overthrow him. So she believes in Dr. Kelson as Dr. Satan and needs an excuse to undermine Jimmy Crystal, because eventually there's a conflict between Jimmy and Dr. Kelson. There's a conflict of interest between them. And so we eventually find ourselves where Jimmy Crystal threatens Dr. Kelson, and Dr. Kelson says, I'll turn your entire group against you, which is what eventually happens. And I thought that Dr. Kelson was going to go on some sort of heel turn, but instead he was just trying to protect Spike. He wanted to protect Spike from these people, and he said that, if you are my son, you are the son of Satan, if you are my son, then we have to give you the same treatment that Jesus got, which means crucifixion. So then we see a lot of backstabbing, a lot of betrayals. Jimmy ends up stabbing Dr. Kelson. Spike stabs Jimmy Crystal. And then the rest of the Jimmys end up dying in different various ways. And we're left with Dr. Kelson on his last breath and dying. And he tells the young boy Spike to go off with Freckle Jesus and find peace, because the boy has been through enough. Meanwhile, this is the part that I didn't quite understand, but it's one of those analytical things I have to call out. Jimmy Crystal was nailed to the wooden cross upside down, by the way, hanging upside down. It was brutal to see. It was brutal to watch. But how did he get there? And how did that cross, built in a day, manage to hold up a human body? I have no idea. Excuse me. And how did Freckle Jesus manage to nail him up to it? I have no idea. The symbolism is all there. The Jesus symbolism is all there. It's whatever. This movie has a lot of satanic themes. I get it. It's fantasy. I'm not trying to jump in that, but I just want to have a good time. I'm not looking for, anything super conservative or non-woke. Like, this movie just is pure entertainment. So give me that. I'm not taking the Satan stuff seriously, because the Satan characters are evil, and you can clearly root against them. It's not like they're promoting evil, right? They're actively showing you how bad these people are. And so Samson comes up, and he can speak acutely, and he takes Dr. Kelson and walks off with him into the wilderness. Now, I believe that Dr. Kelson is dead. I believe this is a good place to end his story arc. However, I could definitely see him coming back if the possibility of him returning is a thing that's on the table. But I'm good with Dr. Kelson right here. I don't need every question answered. I like a little bit of mystery. I like a little bit of intrigue. So Dr. Kelson being taken off at this point in time, concluding his character here, is all good with me. We have an effective, really, really good jump scare when Jimmy is upside down and you see his POV from upside down where he's nailed to the cross, and one of the infected comes up and gets him. There was an effective jump scare. I feel like they could have pulled it off a little bit better, though. Small criticism, still pretty good. It was a wasted opportunity to show that he would be, not show him being torn apart by the infected, right? That would have been more, I guess, satisfying to watch. But I also have a feeling that he might come back as an infected in the third movie, and I'm a little iffy on that. My brother, who I saw it with, also said that. And I'm like, yeah, I could see them retreading that ground and it not being so great. But we'll see, right? So Samson's off. Who knows where. You don't see the father. We don't see Jimmy's father, who was played by Aaron Taylor Johnson. We don't know what happens to Samson's baby. There's no mention of the island, at all, in this movie. So there's a lot of loose strings that need to be tied up in the next movie. But we do see that Spike and Freckle Jesus are running away from the infected on the mainland, and they come across Jim, played by Cillian Murphy. Now, I knew he was going to return in this movie. I don't know in what capacity, but I also had a feeling that I knew he was going to have a daughter, so not a surprise there. Where Selena is, there's no mention of her. We don't know where she's at. I mean, she's mentioned briefly, but we don't know where she's at. We don't know if she's alive or dead. We don't know what happened. We have no idea if Jimmy even left the mainland, or Jim left the mainland, right? All we know is that Jim, played by Cillian Murphy, is with his daughter, who is, it's believed to be that is Selena's daughter as well. So he had a kid with Selena from the first movie. Hannah's nowhere to be found. But they're on this farm and they see Spike and Freckle Jesus, and they're like, okay, well, we got to help them. And that's how the movie ends. Now, I have these certain problems. I said them in this video. It's not the perfect movie. It's not the best movie. It's not, I wouldn't even say it's the best in this franchise, but what I will say, it's a damn good theater experience. It's a damn fun movie. It's better than most of the other movies. It's better than 28 Years Later, the first one, and I think it's a little bit better than 28 Weeks Later. But again, if you're not like keen on going to the movie theaters, wait for streaming for this one. But still, I recommend it. I wouldn't say it's in fresh media or anything, but it's definitely something that I think was really fun to watch. It was really fun to experience, and it makes me excited for the next one. I'm actually hyped for the next one. I hope that they end it, but I digress. So let me know what y'all think in the comments down below. Like, share, comment, subscribe. Let me know what y'all thought about the Bone Temple, if you saw it, if you didn't see it, if you don't care. And I will see y'all in a video very soon.